What happens when a husband thinks he's clever? Marcus Thorne thought he had it all, a simple wife at home and a glamorous mistress on his arm. He decided to treat his new woman to a weekend of luxury, booking the most expensive suite at the 5-star Crestwood Grand Hotel. He used his wife's credit card, laughing at how clueless she was. But he made one fatal mistake. As he and his mistress were being kicked out, the hotel owner walked into the lobby, took one look at his wife, and said, "Madam Sterling, my apologies. Is there a problem here?" The Wednesday morning light in Chloe Thorne's life was always pale yellow. It streamed into the sunroom of her sprawling, yet somehow modest suburban home, illuminating the dust motes dancing over her orchid collection. To any outsider, Chloe had the perfect life. She was married to Marcus Thorne, a man whose ambition had a gravitational pull, a senior partner at a high-flying private equity firm. Their house, a tasteful brick colonial in a wealthy but quiet Connecticut suburb, was her domain. Marcus loved to tell people Chloe was old money. He said it with a proprietary air, as if her lineage was something he had acquired. Her family, the Sterlings, practically built this state. He'd boom at dinner parties, slinging an arm over her shoulder. But my Chloe, she's the simple one. No head for business, just her garden and her charities. Chloe would smile, a small, placid expression she had perfected. It was true, in a way. She did love her orchids. But Marcus, in his 10 years of marriage, had never bothered to look past the smile. He never asked what her charity work entailed. He never asked why she took a private call at 10 a.m. every first of the month, locking her study door. He never asked what C.L. Sterling, the name on the board of directors for Sterling Hospitality, actually stood for. He thought her inheritance was a modest trust fund, a charming allowance that paid for the orchids and the antique furniture. He had no idea that the allowance was a rounding error. He had no idea that Sterling Hospitality wasn't some long-dead relative's defunct company. It was one of the largest privately held luxury hotel chains in North America. A chain she ran. Chloe hadn't intended to keep it a secret, not at first. But when they were dating, Marcus had been so overwhelmingly Marcus. He was all slick suits, blindingly white teeth, and a relentless drive to conquer. He saw her quiet nature as a blank canvas to paint his own success onto. He saw her family name as a stepping stone. And he saw her money, what little he thought she had, as a safety net. So, she let him. She let him be the provider. She let him believe his high 6-figure salary was what kept their world spinning. She ran a multi-billion-dollar empire from a charming home office, while her husband bragged about his latest multi-million-dollar deal, which was often just a memo of understanding. The first crack in this gilded cage wasn't a sound, it was a scent. It was the smell of a perfume that wasn't hers, a cheap, cloying, vanilla and musk scent that clung to his suits when he came home from his late-night client dinners. Then came the credit card bills. They had joint accounts, which Marcus used for household expenses and business incidentals. Chloe had her own private accounts, the ones Marcus knew nothing about. But the joint account statement, the one linked to a high-limit card she'd given him for emergencies, was telling a new story. Dinners at Le Bernardin, when he was supposedly in Chicago. Jewelry purchases from Tiffany's, when her own birthday had passed 2 months prior, marked only by a gas station bouquet. And then the charge that made her blood run cold. A reservation, a celestial suite booking. It wasn't just a hotel, it was her hotel. The Crestwood Grand, the flagship, the jewel in her crown. He was using her money to cheat on her in her own building. The arrogance was so profound, so utterly Marcus, that Chloe didn't even feel sad. She just felt cold. The Celestial Suite. Chloe had designed it herself with her team. It was 4,000 square feet of floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. It had a private elevator, a butler service, and a freestanding marble tub that had to be craned in during construction. It was, quite literally, the height of New York luxury, and her husband had booked it for a Tessa Reed. Chloe stared at the reservation confirmation on her private terminal. He'd even used the Friends and Family discount code, a code she had given him years ago for his visiting relatives. The audacity was breathtaking. He had booked it for the coming Friday. 3 nights. Chloe's hand, the one not holding the mouse, was perfectly still on her antique desk. The orchids in the corner seemed to mock her with their passive beauty. Marcus thought her simple. He thought her clueless. He thought her a decorative, well-bred house mouse. A slow, cold smile touched Chloe's lips. A house mouse might be quiet, but a queen knows how to protect her castle. She picked up her private line, bypassing the main switchboard. It rang once. "Arthur, it's Chloe." Arthur Harrison, the general manager of the Crestwood Grand, was a man of impeccable taste and absolute discretion. He had been trained by her grandfather, the original Sterling. He was one of only 3 people on the hotel's staff who knew what C.L. Sterling looked like. "Madam Sterling." His voice was warm, professional. "What a pleasure. I was just reviewing the quarterly occupancy reports. We're up 12%. "That's wonderful news, Arthur," Chloe said, her voice smooth as glass. "But I'm calling about a personal matter. I will be conducting an unannounced inspection on Friday evening, around 8 p.m. There was a pause. "An inspection, madam?" "Of course. Is there a particular department you'd like to focus on? I can have the manifests prepared." "No manifests," Chloe cut him off. "This will be a social inspection. I want to see the lobby, the bar, the restaurant, during peak service. And I want you to make sure that you, and only you, are available to greet me. No one else on staff is to be informed of my identity. As far as anyone else is concerned, I'm just a guest. A mystery shopper of sorts." "Very good, madam. I will be at the front desk at 8 p.m. sharp. One more thing, Arthur. I see we have a guest checking into the Celestial Suite on Friday. A Marcus Thorne and a Tessa Reed." Arthur's voice didn't change, but Chloe could picture his eyebrow raising. "Yes, madam. Mr. Thorne. He used your personal discount code." "He did," Chloe said. "Arthur, under no circumstances is that reservation to be cancelled or flagged. I want them to check in. I want them to be comfortable. I want them to be enjoying a cocktail in the King's Bar. Let's say around 8:15. Can you arrange a complimentary champagne welcome for them in the bar?" Now, Arthur Harrison understood. His voice dropped into a tone of absolute, lethal efficiency. "Madam Sterling, I believe I can not only arrange it, but I can also ensure they get the premium table. The one by the piano. The one with the excellent lighting." "Arthur," Chloe said, the ice in her voice finally melting into something almost resembling a laugh. "You're a treasure." "I live to serve, madam," he replied. "We'll see you on Friday." Chloe hung up. She looked at the reservation again. "Tessa Reed." She Googled the name. A public Instagram profile popped up. Flashy, blonde, all pouting lips and designer knockoffs. Her bio read, "Living my best life, spoiled by my man." "We'll see about that," Chloe whispered to the empty room. Friday night descended on Manhattan with a cool autumn crispness. Chloe, having told Marcus she was visiting an old college friend in upstate New York, took the train into the city. She didn't dress in her usual quiet, understated elegance. tonight was different. She wore a simple, sleeveless black sheath dress by a designer Marcus wouldn't recognize. Her hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant chignon. Her only jewelry was the simple 3-carat diamond ring Marcus had given her, a ring she now realized was probably purchased with her own family's money, and a pair of modest pearl earrings. She looked like 1,000 other women in New York, professional, wealthy, and anonymous. She entered the Crestwood Grand not as its owner, but as a predator. The lobby was magnificent. It was her lobby. The soaring 40-foot ceilings, the Italian marble, the enormous vase of fresh-cut lilies and delphiniums in the center. Her signature. The scent of white tea and fig, a custom blend she'd commissioned, hung in the air. A quiet piano melody drifted from the King's Bar. She saw Arthur Harrison standing near the check-in desk, ostensibly reviewing a printout. He looked up as she entered. He gave no sign of recognition, only a fractional, almost imperceptible nod. He then turned and disappeared into his office. The signal was clear. He's here. They're here. Chloe walked into the King's Bar. It was dim, intimate, and packed. The walls were a dark mahogany, the booths a deep crimson velvet. And just as Arthur had promised, in the best-lit, most central table by the baby grand piano, sat her husband. He was laughing, a loud, braying laugh she'd once found charismatic. He was wearing his favorite Brioni suit, the one she'd bought him for their anniversary, and across from him sat Tessa Reed. In person, Tessa was even louder than her Instagram profile. She wore a red dress so tight it looked painted on, and her blonde hair was a haystack of extensions. She was dripping in new jewelry, the Tiffany's bracelet, a new diamond necklace. She was loud, and she was, to Chloe's discerning eye, unmistakably cheap. Chloe watched them for a long moment from the shadow of the doorway. She saw Marcus lean in, his hand on Tessa's knee. She saw him whisper something, and Tessa threw her head back and laughed, a shrill sound that cut through the sophisticated jazz. "Disgusting," Chloe murmured. Not the infidelity, but the cliché of it all. She walked to the bar, took a seat on a vacant stool, and ordered a club soda with lime. The bartender, a professional named Liam, whom Chloe had personally commended for his service awards, nodded. "Right away, miss." She sat, her back to the bar, facing the room. She was just another patron. She sipped her drink. She waited. She watched them order another round of champagne. She watched Marcus toast Tessa. "To new beginnings, baby." Tessa giggled. "Oh, Marcus, you're so bad. What about your boring wife?" Marcus waved a dismissive hand. "Chloe, she's fine. She's probably, I don't know, potting a plant. She has no idea what real life is. She's happy in her little bubble. It's better this way. She's taken care of. I'm free," Tessa supplied, her eyes glittering with greed. "Exactly," Marcus said, raising his glass. "Free." Chloe's glass hit the marble bar with a quiet, sharp click. She'd heard enough. She stood up, straightened her dress, and began to walk toward their table. The journey from the bar to the table was only 20 feet, but it felt like a mile. With every step, the sound of the piano seemed to fade, replaced by the thumping of her own heart. This wasn't her. She was the woman in the boardroom, the woman on the conference call, the woman who signed checks with 9 zeros. She was not the woman who confronted a cheating husband in a hotel bar. But as she walked, she caught her reflection in the dark, wood-paneled mirror behind the bar. She saw her own eyes, cold and clear. She wasn't a wife. She wasn't a victim. She was an owner, and this was an infestation. She stopped at their table. Marcus was in the middle of a story, his hands gesturing wildly. Tessa was gazing at him with a look of pure, transactional adoration. "Hello, Marcus," Chloe said. Her voice was quiet, but it sliced through their champagne-fueled bubble. Marcus froze. The glass in his hand stopped halfway to his mouth. He looked up, his face a mask of confusion, then dawning, horrified recognition. He blinked, as if she were an apparition. "Chloe," he sputtered, his voice a full octave higher than usual. What are you doing here? I thought you were in upstate." Tessa's head snapped around. Her smile vanished, replaced by a sneer. "Who is this?" she demanded, her voice as sharp as broken glass. Marcus's face was rapidly cycling through red and white. "Chloe, this is not what it looks like." "Oh?" Chloe said, allowing a small, curious smile to play on her lips. "Because it looks like you're in my hotel, on my dime, with a woman who is not your wife. But please do correct me if I'm wrong." Tessa scoffed, standing up. She was shorter than Chloe, but tried to make up for it in volume. "Your hotel? Honey, this is the Crestwood Grand. I don't think you can even afford the cocktails here. Marcus, baby, who is this dowdy woman?" "Dowdy?" Chloe repeated, the word hanging in the air. "Tessa, shut up!" Marcus hissed, finally finding his voice. He stood up, trying to use his height to intimidate Chloe. He grabbed her arm. "Chloe, you are embarrassing me. You're embarrassing yourself. This is a client. Tessa Reed, a very important client. We're celebrating a deal." "A client," Chloe said, looking at his hand on her arm. She didn't flinch. "Does this client usually require a 3-night stay in the Celestial Suite, paid for on a friends and family discount?" Marcus's face went white as a sheet. He had no idea she knew. He thought his financial tracks were covered. You've been spying on me," he stammered, shifting from defense to offense. "After all I've done for you, I give you everything." "You give me everything?" Chloe repeated, and this time she laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. "Marcus, you haven't given me anything. You've been spending my money, and you're doing it in the most tacky, unoriginal way possible." "That's it!" Tessa shrieked. "I'm not going to be insulted by this house mouse. Marcus, get rid of her." Marcus, desperate and cornered, did the stupidest thing he could have done. He tightened his grip on Chloe's arm and tried to drag her away. "You're leaving? Now! We'll talk about this at home. You're hysterical." He started to physically pull her towards the exit. The bar had gone silent. The pianist had stopped playing. Everyone was watching. "Get your hand off me, Marcus," Chloe said, her voice dangerously low. "You're making a scene," he hissed. "Security!" he yelled, looking around wildly. "Security! This woman is harassing me and my guest." 2 large, blue-suited security guards began to move toward the table from their posts near the lobby. They were new hires. Chloe didn't recognize them. They saw a man in an expensive suit and a woman in a simple black dress. They saw the man yelling. They made an assumption. "Sir, ma'am, is there a problem?" one of them asked. "Yes," Marcus said, pointing at Chloe. "This woman. She's not a guest. She's unhinged. She's my ex, stalking me. I want her removed." The guards looked at Chloe, their faces impassive. "Ma'am, we're going to have to ask you to come with us." Chloe looked at the guard. She looked at her husband, his face slick with sweat and triumph. She looked at Tessa, who was smiling, a smug, victorious smirk. "He's right," Chloe said, her voice carrying across the silent room. "This is a misunderstanding." And right on cue, a crisp, authoritative voice cut through the tension. An enormous one, I'm afraid. "Gentlemen, you will take your hands off her." Immediately, Arthur Harrison emerged from the shadow of the main doorway. He was flanked by 2 different security men, the heads of hotel security, men Chloe knew by name. Arthur himself was the picture of managerial perfection. His suit was immaculate, his silver hair was perfectly coiffed, and his expression was one of polite, controlled fury. He walked directly to the table and stood not next to Marcus, but next to Chloe, creating a physical barrier between her and her husband. "Sir," Arthur said, his voice dangerously calm, addressing Marcus, "please release her arm. Now." Marcus, bewildered, let go. "Harrison, what's the meaning of this? This woman is harassing my client. Have her removed." Arthur Harrison ignored him completely. He turned his full, deferential attention to Chloe. He bowed his head ever so slightly. "Madam Sterling, my sincerest apologies for the disturbance. I trust you are unharmed." The entire bar went still. You could have heard a pin drop on the thick, plush carpet. Marcus Thorne froze. His face, which had been red with anger, turned a blotchy, pale grey. What did you call her?" Tessa's smug smile evaporated, replaced by a look of slack-jawed confusion. "Madam, who?" Arthur straightened up, his gaze sweeping over Marcus and Tessa with a look of profound, icy disdain. "I called her Madam Sterling, as in Chloe Louise Sterling, the founder, president, and CEO of Sterling Hospitality, the owner of the Crestwood Grand, this hotel." Marcus's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He looked from Arthur to Chloe, his brain short-circuiting. "Sterling," he whispered, the name finally connecting. Your family name. CL. Sterling. On the board. That's you." Chloe gave him that same, small, placid smile, the one he'd seen for 10 years. "You never asked what the C stood for, Marcus. You were always too busy talking about yourself." Tessa finally found her voice, though it was a desperate squeak. "That's impossible. She's just his wife. She's a nobody." "Miss Reed," Arthur Harrison said, pulling a small tablet from under his arm and tapping the screen. "You are the guest in the Celestial Suite, correct? The one who has charged $18,000 in pre-arrival purchases from the hotel boutiques to the card on file?" Tessa's eyes widened. "That card," Arthur continued, "belongs to Madam Sterling. It has just been cancelled, as has your friends and family discount. And I'm afraid your reservation." "You can't do that!" Marcus finally roared, finding his voice. "I'm her husband. That's my room. That's my money." "No, Marcus," Chloe said, finally looking him in the eye. "It's my hotel. It's my money. And you are just a misunderstanding." She turned to her general manager. "Arthur?" Arthur nodded. "Mr. Thorne, Miss Reed, on behalf of Sterling Hospitality, I am informing you that you are trespassing." "Trespassing?" Marcus bellowed, the word echoing in the now silent bar. The pianist's hands were frozen over the keys. Every eye was on them. "Are you insane, Harrison? I am a guest. We are checked in. This is my wife. You can't just evict us. This is slander. It's assault." "On the contrary, sir," Arthur said, his voice as sharp and cold as a shard of ice. "The hotel reserves the right to refuse service to any individual, and your behavior towards the owner of this establishment, not to mention your fraudulent use of her corporate accounts, constitutes grounds for immediate removal. David, Michael." He motioned to his 2 security chiefs. The 2 large men stepped forward. They didn't grab Marcus. Not yet. They simply flanked him, their presence a silent, immovable promise. Marcus looked from the guards to Arthur, and finally to Chloe. The fog of his arrogance was beginning to clear, replaced by a cold, slithering dread. But he was Marcus Thorne. He blustered. He negotiated. He won. This was just another deal to be muscled through. He tried to soften his voice, to inject the faux reasonable tone he used in boardrooms just before a hostile takeover. "Chloe, stop this. This is a private matter. You're making a fool of yourself. Look at these people." He gestured to the silent, watching patrons. "This is beneath you. We're better than this. Let's go home. We can talk about this. At home, like adults." The word home hung in the air, thick and poisonous. He meant the brick colonial. He meant his territory, the place where she was the simple wife. Chloe's placid smile finally broke. It didn't become a frown. It became something sharper, something colder. It was the smile of a predator that had just heard a mouse invite it back to its nest. "There is no home for us anymore, Marcus," she said, her voice quiet but carrying with absolute finality. "You made that choice when you booked the Celestial Suite. You were right about one thing all those years. I am happy in my bubble." She took a step back and gestured, not just at the bar, but at the soaring ceilings, the Italian marble, the liveried staff. "This sterling hospitality, this is my bubble, and you are no longer welcome in it." The last vestige of Marcus's control shattered. He was losing, in public, to her. But before he could counter, Tessa, who had been frozen in a state of slack-jawed horror, finally processed what was happening. Her benefactor was a fraud. Her weekend of luxury was imploding. Her entire transactional world was collapsing. Panic, raw and undisguised, took over. She turned on Marcus, her voice a desperate shriek. "I didn't do anything. It was him. He told me he was leaving her. He told me you were nothing. He said she was a boring old hag. He said she was practically an invalid." Chloe actually laughed. It was not a sound Marcus had ever heard. It was a cold, sharp, metallic sound. "Miss Reed, your loyalty is as cheap as your dress, and I see, infinitely less durable." "Arthur," she said, turning away from them, her voice now crisp with executive authority. "Please have these people escorted from the building. Their belongings from the Celestial Suite should be packed and brought to the curb. They can wait for them with the rest of the trash." "No!" Tessa shrieked. This was the part she understood. The things. "You can't! My stuff! My new bags! The Chanel! The Fendi from the boutique! You can't take my things! I'll call the police! That's my property!" She lunged, not at Chloe, but at the idea of her possessions. One of the security guards caught her arm. "Oh, but I can, Miss Reed," Chloe said, turning back. She was an educator now, teaching a very specific, very painful lesson. "Those new bags? They were purchased this afternoon, were they not? From the hotel's own boutiques? And they were charged to the card on file. My card. A card that, as of, about 5 minutes ago, was reported stolen. As was the discount code you used. You're not a guest, Miss Reed. You're an accomplice to fraud. Those items are hotel property until they are paid for. And since your man is about to have his assets frozen, I'd say they're mine. Consider them a small restocking fee for the sanitization the suite will require." Tessa's face crumpled. The fight went out of her, replaced by the gulping, desperate sobs of a child. Marcus, however, had found his footing. He was a cornered animal, and he had one last rusted weapon, the legal system. He thought he finally understood the game. She'd revealed her hand, and in his mind, it was a fatal mistake. He shook off the guard's arm, straightened his Brioni suit, and laughed, a dry, rasping sound. You idiot!" he spat at Chloe. His eyes were glittering with a new, venomous hope. "You arrogant, stupid bitch! You think this is a victory? You just made the biggest mistake of your life." He was loud now, projecting for the entire room. "You'll regret this, Chloe. You'll be hearing from my lawyer, Rex Brannigan. He's going to end you. I'll take you for everything. Half of this is mine. Do you hear me? Half! Half of this bar, half of this building, half of your precious company. I'm your husband. That's the law. You just publicly admitted to your entire worth, and I'm entitled to half of it." He was beaming, a man who thought he'd just found the ace in his sleeve. The bar patrons murmured. He was right, wasn't he? Half. Chloe looked at him. The pity in her eyes was so profound, it was almost cruel. She took one step toward him, so close the guards tensed. She spoke quietly, her voice a silken thread meant only for him. "Oh, Marcus, you really should have read the prenup." He froze. "What? What prenup?" "The one you signed 10 years ago at Alan Jacoby's office. The one you didn't even read. The one you called a formality and dusty nonsense before we rushed off to our engagement party." That won't hold up," Marcus stammered, his new confidence evaporating like mist. I'm your husband. I contributed." "You contributed nothing," Chloe whispered, her voice a stiletto. "My lawyer, Alan Jacoby, you remember, the one you called a dusty old fossil. He's very, very good. He's also the executor of my family's trust. The prenup is not a document, Marcus. It's a fortress. Premarital assets, it says. The Sterling Hospitality Group, all its holdings, past, present, and future, were inherited from my grandfather. They are separate and sacrosanct. They are all mine. They were always all mine." She leaned in, her eyes boring into his. "You, on the other hand, signed away all rights to my assets in exchange for, I believe the clause was, all future earnings from your own career." She looked him up and down at his rumpled, expensive suit, his sweaty, blotchy face. "How's that career looking right now, darling?" The color drained from Marcus's face. He was a fish in a vacuum. No air. No escape. He had no words. There was nothing left to say. "David, Michael, get them out of my hotel," Chloe ordered. This time, the guards did not hesitate. David took Marcus by the right bicep. Michael took Tessa by her left, and they began to walk. The journey from the King's Bar across the 40-foot expanse of the gleaming marble lobby was the longest walk of Marcus Thorne's life. It was a walk of pure, unadulterated humiliation. Every footstep echoed. The other guests in the lobby, dressed for dinner or the theatre, stopped. They stared. They pointed. And then, worst of all, they started recording. Little red lights, the glow of iPhone screens. Marcus saw them. He saw his reflection, a man being frog-marched, his wife's nemesis weeping beside him, captured on 100 screens. This wasn't just a private downfall. This was a public execution. This was a viral video in the making. "Take your hands off me," he hissed, trying to regain a shred of dignity. "I can walk." The guard's grip just tightened, a vice of bone and muscle. He was a puppet. Tessa was a wreck, openly weeping, her body limp. "This is a mistake. Please. My father is a lawyer," she lied, a useless, pathetic appeal to an authority that didn't exist. The grand, gold-filigreed glass doors of the Crestwood Grand whooshed open. The sudden blast of cold, November night air hit them. The smell of diesel fumes and roasted nuts from a street cart was a slap in the face after the warm, curated scent of white tea and fig. And then, the final indignity. They were on the pavement. The guards released their arms, and Marcus, off balance, stumbled, nearly falling onto the concrete. He caught himself on a brass-plated lamppost. He, Marcus Thorne, a man who flew private, was a curb-sitter. A bellman, A young man named Javier, whom Marcus had probably never even looked at, came running out of the hotel. He was carrying Tessa's 2 garish faux snakeskin suitcases. He didn't set them down. He dumped them. They clattered onto the sidewalk. One of the cheap zippers burst, and the suitcase flopped open, spilling cheap lingerie, a tacky I-3N snow globe, and 3 pairs of new, high-end shoes onto the dirty concrete. "My things!" Tessa shrieked, a primal wail of loss. She dove for them, scrambling on her hands and knees on the Fifth Avenue sidewalk, trying to shove her belongings back into the broken bag. Marcus just stood there, leaning on the lamppost, watching the woman he'd thrown his life away for groveling in the gutter. He looked back at the hotel. Through the glass, he could see Chloe. She was standing in the center of the lobby, a picture of absolute, serene control. She watched him for a moment. She didn't smile, she didn't wave, she just was. Then she turned her back on him and walked toward the private elevators. Inside, the lobby was restoring itself to order. The younger guard, the one who had first accosted Chloe, approached Arthur Harrison, his face pale and slick with sweat. "Mr. Harrison." "Sir?" "Madam, I didn't know. I was just... He said she was a stalker. I almost..." Arthur Harrison put a firm, steadying hand on the young man's shoulder. He wasn't angry. He was teaching. "You followed a guest's complaint, son. An understandable error. But let this be your most important lesson at this hotel. The guest is not always right. But the madam always comes first. Always. Now go back to your post and straighten your tie." The guard, looking profoundly relieved, nodded sharply. "Yes, sir." Arthur turned as Chloe approached him by the private gold-leaf elevator bank. "Arthur," she said, her voice calm, "the Celestial Suite. It's tainted. I won't be staying there. Please have it deep cleaned. Throw everything out. The rugs, the furniture, all of it. I'll redecorate." "At once, Madam Sterling," Arthur said, bowing his head. "Your private residence? The penthouse?" "It is, as always, kept ready for you." "Yes," Chloe said, as the elevator doors chimed and opened, revealing a car of polished private mahogany. "The penthouse will be perfect." She stepped inside. "And Arthur?" she said, turning back as the doors began to close. "Madam? Send up a bottle of real champagne, the 1996 Krug, and get Alan Jacoby on the line for me. Tell him, the negotiation phase is over. It's time to file." "Yes, madam." "Oh," she added, as a final thought, "and call the bank. I need a new credit card." The door slid shut, encasing her in polished wood and silence, leaving Arthur Harrison alone in the magnificent, quiet lobby. Outside, the sounds of Tessa's weeping and Marcus's first, desperate, failed attempt to hail a cab were lost to the New York night. The immediate aftermath of an explosion is not the fire, it is the silence. It is the ringing in your ears, the dust settling, the dawning, horrifying realization of the new landscape. For Marcus Thorne, the landscape was a stretch of pavement on Fifth Avenue. He was sitting on the curb, a man in a $4,000 Brioni suit, sitting on a dirty New York City sidewalk, next to 2 garish faux snakeskin suitcases. Tessa was standing, her arms crossed, her face a streaked, ruinous mask of cheap mascara and pure, unadulterated fury. "You said," she shrieked, her voice a raw scrape, "you said she was nothing, a simple little wife, a house mouse. You said you had all the money." "Shut up, Tessa," Marcus growled, rubbing his temples. He had a headache that felt like a drill bit. He pulled out his phone. He had to fix this. He'd call his lawyer. He'd call his bank. He'd call someone. He jabbed at his contacts. "Call Alan Jacoby." "Alan Jacoby. Calling." The phone rang once, twice. The party you are trying to reach is not accepting calls at this time. Goodbye. Not accepting. He was blocked. Chloe had already blocked him from her lawyer. What's wrong? Tessa demanded, seeing the look on his face. Call your bank. Get me a car. I am not standing here. I am handling it, he roared. He dialed his private banker at Chase. Mr. Thorne, what a surprise. The banker's voice was suddenly cool, all traces of their usual golf buddy familiarity gone. Robert, thank God. I have a situation. My cards are being declined. It must be a security flag. Can you lift it? I'm in a bit of a jam. There was a stiff pause. Mr. Thorne, I'm afraid I can't. Liss Pendon's notice was just filed against all your known assets by the Sterling Hospitality Legal Group. It's a very comprehensive filing. A what? What does that mean? It means, Marcus, Robert said, his voice flat, that your accounts are frozen, pending litigation, all of them. The joint accounts, your personal trading account, even your 401k. I've never seen anything move this fast. I'm sorry. The line clicked. He'd been hung up on, frozen. The word hit Marcus with the force of a physical blow. Well, Tessa snapped. My car. The accounts are temporarily frozen, Marcus stammered, his world tilting. Frozen. Tessa's eyes went wide with animal panic. She wasn't angry anymore. She was terrified. You mean, you're broke? I'm not broke. It's a misunderstanding. The kind Chloe was talking about, he said, the words tasting like ash. Oh my God, Tessa whispered. She looked at him, truly saw him for the first time. He wasn't a provider. He wasn't a ticket. He was a fraud. You used me, she screamed. You lied to me. I lied. You were the one dripping in jewels you didn't pay for. They were gifts. They were rent. Tessa slapped him, hard. The sound cracked in the night air. Then she did the only practical thing she could. She saw a yellow cab stuck in traffic and lunged for it, yanking the back door open. Get me out of here, she yelled at the driver. I have cash. Just drive. The cabbie, seeing Marcus in his rumpled suit and the suitcases, gunned the engine and peeled away, leaving Marcus Thorne alone on the curb. He sat there for 10 minutes, then 20. The doorman of the Crestwood Grand, under strict orders from Arthur, did not acknowledge him. He was just another piece of human debris on the New York sidewalk. He had no money. His phone was at 10% battery. His wife, the simple woman, had just checkmated him in 3 moves. Eventually, he stood up, abandoning Tessa's luggage. He walked 3 blocks to the subway. He, Marcus Thorne, a partner at a private equity firm, had to use the last $5 in his wallet to buy a Metro card. As he swiped through the turnstile, the metallic clack sounded, to his ears, like the door of a prison cell slamming shut. Upstairs, in the celestial suite, Chloe Sterling was not celebrating. She was working. The sanitizing had been swift. The champagne flutes Marcus and Tessa had used were thrown away, not washed. The linens were stripped. The scent of white tea and fig was pumped back into the air, erasing the cloying vanilla musk of Tessa's perfume. Chloe stood at the window, a single glass of her favorite champagne, a 1996 Krug, not the flashy crystal Marcus preferred, in her hand. She was on the phone. Alan, it's done. Madam Sterling. Alan Jacoby's voice was warm, a comforting baritone. I've just seen the alerts. Liss Pendon's is filed. The petition will be served to his office at 9:01 a.m. tomorrow. The security team is en route to the Connecticut property. He will not be able to gain entry without your express written consent. Good, Chloe said. He mentioned a lawyer. He said he would take me for everything. Alan Jacoby laughed, a dry, dusty sound. My dear Chloe, he's your husband. He has rights. He is absolutely entitled to... Let me check. Ah, yes. Exactly 50% of the marital debt he's accrued, and 100% of the future earnings he signed away his rights to your assets for. He's a man of, let's call it, negative net worth. The prenup, is that solid? The prenup, Madame Sterling, is not a document. It is a fortress. It was designed by your grandfather, and I was merely its humble custodian. It states, in no uncertain terms, that Sterling Hospitality and all its holdings, past, present, and future, are separate and sacrosanct. In exchange, Mr. Thorne was granted, well, he was granted you, and he didn't seem to value that asset, did he? No, Alan, Chloe said, watching the city lights. He didn't. Get some rest, madam. The next few days will be loud. The press is going to have a field day. Let them, Chloe said. It's time they learned my name. The next 3 months were, as Alan predicted, loud. The story broke on page 6 first, a blurry cell phone video titled Billionaire's Revenge, Hotel Queen Evicts Cheating Hubby. It was a sensation. Marcus was fired. The termination was brutal. His partners called an emergency meeting in which he was not invited. The morality clause, combined with the public scandal bringing disrepute to the firm, and, most damningly, the misappropriation of client-related funds, Chloe's lawyers had provided a very detailed audit of his expense account, meant he was out. No severance, no golden parachute, just a cardboard box of his office belongings, which his assistant left in the lobby of his new, grim apartment, a one-bedroom rental in a walk-up in Murray Hill. He hired a lawyer, of course, a shark named Rex Brannigan, whose face was plastered on buses under the slogan, "Get your Rex Ompence." Their first meeting was in Brannigan's gaudy office. "It's a slam dunk," Brannigan boomed, chewing on an unlit cigar. "We'll destroy her. This prenup is toilet paper. We'll argue marital contribution. You hosted the parties. You were the face of the brand. You built her confidence." Marcus, looking pale and 10 years older, seized on this. "Exactly. I made her who she is. Before me, she was just a wallflower. She owes me." Brannigan's associate, a young, pale woman named Maya, cleared her throat. "Mr. Brannigan, their lawyer is Alan Jacoby." Brannigan's face faltered, just for a second. "Jacoby? The old fossil? He's a corporate dinosaur. This is a divorce, baby. This is a street fight. He won't know what hit him." "He's also," Maya added, reading from a tablet, "the executor of the Sterling Family Trust, a signatory on the corporate charter, and... oh, he's the one who wrote the state statutes on premarital asset protection. He was a state senator, sir." Brannigan waved a dismissive hand. "Details. We'll drown him in paperwork. We file for discovery. We demand everything. The hotel ledgers, the board minutes, her personal emails. We'll find the dirt. Trust me, Marcus. We're going to get paid." They filed. And Alan Jacoby did nothing. He didn't respond with anger. He responded with compliance. "They want the ledgers, madam?" Alan asked Chloe, sipping tea in her new permanent office, the Celestial Suite. "Give them the ledgers," Chloe said. "They want the board minutes?" "Send them. They've subpoenaed Arthur Harrison for a deposition." Chloe smiled. "Oh, please, let them. I'll pay for the transcript." The deposition of Arthur Harrison was a bloodbath. Rex Brannigan, all bluster and sweat, paced the room. "Mr. Harrison, is it true that you, as general manager, colluded with Mrs. Thorne?" "Madam Sterling," Arthur corrected, his voice perfectly level. "With Madam Sterling, to humiliate and emotionally distress her husband, a paying guest." "Mr. Brannigan, I did not collude. I acted on the orders of my superior and the owner of the hotel. Mr. Thorne was trespassing." trespassing. He was a guest. He was a guest of Madame Sterling's, using her private discount code and her personal credit card without her authorization, for the purposes you see on your file. When she, the cardholder, arrived and revoked her authorization, he became a trespasser. A loud one at that. I simply expedited his checkout. You evicted him. You threw him onto the street. I had my security team escort an unauthorized, belligerent individual from the premises, per hotel policy. A policy, Arthur added, that was written by Madame Sterling herself. Brannigan, red-faced, had no follow-up. The mountain of paperwork they had demanded arrived on a single encrypted hard drive. It was so clean, so perfect, so utterly ironclad that Brannigan's team spent 3 weeks trying to find a loophole and came up with nothing. The clock was ticking. Marcus's money was gone. His meager savings were not just exhausted. They were gone. The call came on a Tuesday. "Marcus, my boy," Rex Brannigan boomed. "Listen, we've hit a snag. A retainer snag. My associate can't seem to process your last payment. Before we can file the next motion, a killer motion, by the way, this one's a nuke. We just need to clear up the outstanding balance." Marcus was sitting in his dark apartment, eating cold pizza. I can't pay. Not right now. I'm in between roles. The line went cold. The boom was gone. "No pay, no play, Marcus. I'm off the case. You're on your own." Marcus Thorne, the man who lived by his reputation, was forced to accept a court-appointed mediator. The divorce, which he had hoped would be his golden ticket, was over in 45 minutes. He was left with his clothes, his car, a leased BMW which was promptly repossessed, and half of the joint credit card debt. He was, as Alan Jacoby had predicted, a man of negative net worth. For Chloe, the opposite happened. The Page 6 story was followed by a Forbes interview. A sharp, skeptical reporter named Jenna Wu arrived at the Celestial Suite, which was now, officially, the Sterling Hospitality Global Headquarters. "So, the story is, you were hiding," Jenna said, her pen poised. "A secret billionaire. Why? Were you afraid?" Chloe, dressed not in a simple dress, but a sharp, crimson power suit, leaned forward. "I wasn't hiding, Miss Wu. I was working. I was running a multinational corporation from my sunroom. My ex-husband was the one who needed the spotlight. I was more interested in the balance sheets. He mistook my discretion for a lack of competence. A lot of people do when it comes to quiet women. And the hotel incident? The eviction. They said you were ruthless." Chloe smiled, a small, controlled expression. A guest was harassing the owner. A guest was defrauding the company on a multi-thousand-dollar level. A guest was bringing, let's call it an undesirable element, onto the premises. I acted as any CEO would. The fact that the guest was my husband was personally disappointing, but professionally irrelevant. You can't let a pest infest the flagship. You have to handle the problem. Jenna put down her pen. My God, he never stood a chance, did he? He had a 10-year chance, Chloe replied, her voice softening for a second. He just cashed it in. The article, "The Queen of the Crestwood, Chloe Sterling is done. Being your simple wife," went viral. It wasn't just a business story. It was a cultural moment. Chloe became an icon. She was flooded with speaking requests, TV interviews, and letters from women all over the world. Women who had been underestimated. Women who had been called simple. Women who were house mice sitting on empires. 6 months after the eviction, Chloe stood at the window of her office, the city sparkling below. Arthur Harrison knocked and entered. He was now her official chief of staff. "Madam, the architects are ready for the London presentation. The new tower design is breathtaking, and your 10 o'clock call with the Tokyo group is confirmed. They're very eager." "Thank you, Arthur," Chloe said, turning from the window. She was no longer just a CEO. She was a brand. She was the woman who had taken back her own life, and in doing so had inspired thousands of others. "Oh, and madam," Arthur said, his face impassive, but a twinkle in his eye. "This arrived. It was in the General Mail, but it seems personal." He handed her a flimsy, cheap postcard. The picture was of a dusty gas station in Arizona. The postmark was from a place called Hope, AZ. The irony was, Chloe thought, a bit heavy-handed. She turned it over. The handwriting was a desperate, angry scrawl. "You ruined me. I hope you're happy, alone in your ice tower." It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. Chloe looked at the card for a long moment. She thought of the man who wrote it, the slick, charming man she'd married, the desperate, screaming man who'd been dragged from her bar, the pathetic, broken man who was now, apparently, somewhere in Arizona, blaming her for his own self-destruction. "Shall I have it disposed of?" Arthur asked. "No, Arthur," Chloe said, a slow smile spreading across her face. "I'll keep it. It's a business expense reminder. The cost of a bad partnership." She didn't put it in a drawer. She propped it up on her pristine $1,000 desk blotter. A trophy. A warning. "He's still so dramatic, isn't he?" she mused. "My ice tower. He sees alone, I see. Uninterrupted. He sees an ice tower. I see a headquarters." She tapped the postcard. "He's right about one thing, though. I am happy." A new energy, a new purpose, filled the room. "Arthur," she said, her voice electric, "get Alan Jacoby on the line. And then, get me the head of our charitable division, the one we keep for tax purposes." "The Sterling Foundation?" "Madam, it's mostly dormant. We fund a few scholarships." "Well, we're waking it up," Chloe said, turning to her desk. "I'm seeding it with a new personal donation. Let's call it the Marcus Thorne Severance Package. Everything he would have gotten if he'd been a decent human being. A donation, madam. I want to start a new initiative, a grant, a foundation for women. Women who have been told they're simple. Women who are sitting on billion-dollar ideas but are being told to go pot plants. Women who are partners to men who see them as accessories." Arthur was smiling, a full, genuine smile. This was the Chloe he'd known for 30 years, the one her grandfather had trained. "A wonderful idea, madam. What will you call it?" Chloe looked at the postcard, then at the city. "He called me a house mouse. Let's call it the Lioness Fund, for the quiet ones who are ready to roar." She picked up the postcard and, with a sense of finality, dropped it into the shredder. She was done with the past. "Now," she said, "all business. About the King's Bar, I've never liked that name. It's derivative and inaccurate. It has been the name for 50 years, madam." "Then it's 50 years out of date," Chloe said. "It's the center of the hotel. It's where the most important person in the room holds court. Let's update the signage." "To what, Madam Sterling?" Chloe looked at Arthur, her eyes clear and bright. "The Queen's Court. It's time for a new reign." And just like that, Madam Sterling took back her name, her power, and her company, all because her cheating husband thought she was too simple to notice. He saw a house mouse, but he was living in the Queen's castle, and he forgot the #1 rule. The house always wins. Chloe's story is a powerful reminder that the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. They're not being silent. They're just listening. What did you think of Marcus's epic downfall? Was there a moment you were cheering for Chloe? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for listening to this story. If you love drama and seeing karma delivered, do me a huge favor. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and be sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story. We have new ones dropping every week, and you don't want to miss what happens next.